It's Monday, the 28th day of October, 7:11 a.m. It is time for The Way It Is. We are analyzing and looking at the stories we've seen dominate headlines in the last 5 days and looking at what we are likely to see also going forward, because most of these stories are still developing. And joining me this morning on set is Professor Gitili Naituli, a political analyst. You must know him. He's a common feature on our checkpoint with Yvonne every Sunday, and also Ngunjiri Wambogo. We see him every Thursday here with us, a columnist and also convener of Ukenya Forum. Thank you both for being with us this morning. I'll begin with what we saw happen this past weekend with the president's statements and remarks. And one of the things he did do again yesterday was come to the defense of the security agencies, and also, has very strong words, rather caution for the media in terms of coverage. And one of the statements he made is that yesterday the media should practice responsible reporting. So I'll start with you, Professor, and I'll ask, was the media responsible in coverage of Westgate, in your opinion?
I think the media was very responsible in covering that story. I think the government shouldn't be willing to allow its citizens to know the truth. We are made to believe that the terrorists were very many, 10 to 15, and we are meant to believe that they fought for 4 days. But that story didn't tell us the truth. And what I feel is the government, instead of doing the gymnastics it is doing, it didn't appreciate that. When the aircraft ate Twin Towers in the US in 9/11, the Americans formed a commission which laid in bare the fact that the security agencies were not communicating, and that attack could have been prevented. And they have now filled those gaps. It has been now difficult for the terrorists to attack that country again. They appreciated the truth. Our government needs to appreciate the truth and to know that when the system is laid in bare, the weaknesses exposed, only then can the weaknesses be corrected.
And when you talk about weaknesses, Wambogo, I want to bring you in on this. We heard the president also talk about people make mistakes, and the best thing to do is to learn from mistakes. Initially, we'd had him talking about the operation having been botched, which was open for everybody to see. So while he realizes and is, committal and is, confessing that indeed things went wrong, we're not likely to see anything happening in terms of what people were calling for heads rolling. In fact, he's calling for people to bear with and to know that people learn from mistakes.
I'm not sure whether that's exactly what he's saying, in that the first thing that he's actually done is admitted that mistakes were made.
Yes.
And I think he's done that more than once.
Yes.
Now, what we haven't seen, and I guess in his defense, you don't wake up and fire people the day after something goes wrong. You must first find out exactly what went wrong and who needs to get fired. And no, as civilians and as sitting on the other side of the TV screen, a lot of us can tell. Nani needs to go home, Nani needs to go home, Nani needs to go home. And I guess it's not, I would assume it's not as easy when you're sitting on his desk to figure out, because yes, people need to actually get punished. And I do hope that we will see heads rolling. But I think we're also being a bit unfair on him. Remember, he's a head of state, commander-in-chief of the armed forces. We don't know what he's telling them behind closed doors, but he really can't come out and disown them to the public, because again, these are the same people who he depends on a lot more other things than what we actually know of. Remember, for example, when he went and did a lunch with the rec unit of the GSU, that needed to be done, because these are the guys who protect him. It's his immediate security team comes from rec. So you don't want to stand up in public and castigate them and bash them. You most probably will do that behind closed doors. KDF are the guys he's got in Somali, are the people who give him military intelligence, are the people. So he will not bash them in public. What I hope he's doing is that he's actually bashing them in private, in behind closed doors, and that some response will be done. There's a question you asked, Prof, when you asked whether you think the media was
irresponsible.
I think Westgate was a learning process for a lot of us. I remember I was among the group of people who made a lot of noise on social media on the first day, on that Saturday, about some of the things, some of the gaps I saw the media making. I mean, we were seeing dead bodies. We were seeing, there's some things that really you don't see on media. And I think for a lot of us, and I remember quite a number of people from media coming out and saying, look guys, this one we had not really, this is something that we were also engaging with for the first time.
Yeah.
The first hour or 2 or 3 of that period was a bit disorganized, and there was a certain amount of responsibility from the media. But I think gradually, by the end of that day and over time, they learned.
Professor does not agree, and also because the president was coming in defense of the IG in respect to KTN's coverage. Jichopevu, not the entire coverage.
So,
the entire coverage, everybody was making their own there. But in terms of the Jichopevu and inside story, KTN was the last to air that footage.
I'm not.
So that's why my disagreement
I'm not attacking KTN. I'm saying we are seated here. We are analyzing. Remember, as he's analyzing what KDF and everybody, even we have to analyze what were the lessons learned.
Okay.
And I think one of the lessons learned was that even the media went through a learning process. And I think we all have to admit.
Did they go through a learning process with Jichopevu and
I think the media, in my opinion, did us proud on that Jichopevu.
Yeah.
Because it's clear to all of us when we looked at that situation that there are these 4 terrorists, 2 come in and 2 come in from the top. 2 approach. We saw very clearly that these fellows eventually went towards the entry where the civilians were living, the staff, and we realized that there was no hostages, because we were meant to believe there was. Remember, they told us the KDF were controlling floor by floor. What that tells us is that the police was doing a fantastic job, and that they need credit for it. Because the police were on the ground, the flying squad, 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And if they were allowed without interruption, without bringing the KDF in, they would have completed that job in less than 4 hours. But it was made 4 days' work. Now, the question in our minds, having seen that, is what were they doing for those 4 days? What exactly were they fighting in 4 days? And when you tell us you have liberated one section of the building, we expect you have grown a few of the people who are holding it, so that you liberate the second and the second.
Yeah.
What I was saying, the government has no real business lying to its citizens. We support the government. We support our security forces. And we know they defend us. They put their life on the line, but we want the truth so that this thing is not repeated again. And I believe that the president should give those 2 reporters a mentor. Because even him, I'm not so sure he knows exactly what was happening there. Now, the thing also is we need to learn a new appreciation of the police force, because the police deal with the criminals every day within buildings, and that's why they were so successful before the military came in. The military is used to fighting people on the other side. In that situation, there was nobody on the other side. It was Kenyans in hostage situation on the other side. It was Kenyans building on the other side.
All right.
So it was a mix that if we learn well, we are not going to repeat again. We will allow the police or the GSO to do their work, which they are trained to do, deal with bad situations within confined areas. We need to accept that, because if we don't accept that, we won't move forward.
All right, let's go to the ICC now. Quite a bit to discuss this morning, and the Deputy President is around. The President has just left the country, that's why he's in the country. Last week we saw the appeal uphold the request by the by the prosecution to have him be present throughout his trial, and now the prosecution also saying that they will appeal that decision made by the trial chamber to stagger Kenyatta's appearance in the Hague trial. So in terms of those developments, the UNSC decision or meeting, at least over these particular cases that's coming up, and then we're hearing about the bipartisan approach that's likely to come up. Your thoughts? I'll begin with you, Ngunjiri.
I think the ICC cases are going to be with us for a while. Though, if you'd allow me, my mind got stuck in the media conversation.
1 minute.
Well, just 1 minute. I think it's important for us not to constrain the conversation about how media behaved on Westgate to Jichopevu, because that seems to be a mistake we're making. We're having a conversation about media's performance and the conversation that is coming from government and relating it all only to Jichopevu.
Because the comment when the bashing came, It was based on Jichope when IG made those remarks. And the criticism from the public and all the reaction and the media as well was based on that. So that is why there's all that centeredness.
So the conversation needs to get expanded so that we don't have a situation. First, we stop looking like we're zeroing in on Alanamu and Mohammed. And so that we actually look, we need to review. I'm saying, if we are having this conversation, the government is having this conversation. But as Kenyans, if we're going to have a conversation about media's engagement with Westgate, we must expand it beyond Jichope. So that we actually we look at the entire coverage of Westgate from day one and ask ourselves, were there places that could be improved and what were the things that stood out that were positive
and that's a conversation this Thursday we're going to be really taking it further.
Sophia, on the face of it, I just want to remind them on an American president's statement, and I don't remember who it was. He said, people are entitled to their opinion, but not to their facts. What we saw are facts. What we saw, the report we saw, those who are fact, and they are not quarreling those facts. They need to quarrel the fact. They need to discount them, then we are together. But they are not discounting them, so they are summoning these innocent people whose crime is to do their work and do it so well.
So as we could continue, but just actually for our viewers on Thursday, we're going to be talking about that media and its role in enhancing Kenya. Because at the end of the day, it's that the president was also saying that some, the terrorist works were being exalted and all that. So we'll talk about that in detail this coming Thursday. I look forward to that show. But let's go to the ICC now.
Yes. First, I'm thinking about this from several points. First, there's been this weekend. There's been a lot of comments about the president not going. I mean, we had them during Olelenku's homecoming, and I think I think we're not going to get to that point. I think the amount of work being done by Uhuru Kenyatta's defense is meant to ensure we actually don't get to a confrontation, a head-to-head confrontation.
But look, it's possible now.
It is very possible. But then we still have a meeting coming up this week by the UN Security Council requesting for a deferral. Whether that comes through or not is one thing. We also have the request that the defense put in on Friday, asking for a deferral from November 12th to after February 12th. So I think it's going to be an interesting time, because also I've been doing quite a number of commentaries on ICC and Bensouda's position right now. I don't know whether it's in ICC's best interest to do a head-to-head confrontation right now
with the president.
It's a kind of situation that both of you lose, because so you're going to come up with a warrant. It's going to become a fugitive, and then what? So you still have the fight. Remember, we have 40 out of 49 countries from Africa that have put in this request to the UN Security Council. This is, if you ignore that conversation, even for the UN Security Council itself, the 5 permanent members and the non-permanent members, if you ignore a request made by 40 out of 49 countries, what are you saying? So it's an unfolding, it's a developing story in my opinion.
We'll watch closely.
It's something that we are going to know by the end of this week and figure out where this conversation is going.
And Professor, I think right now a man who has a great appreciation of how it feels to be in your own country is Ruto, because clearly just being in that court and every time he gets to come, he has this really huge sense of relief. And unfortunate for him, what happened, seeing that reversal and the judges saying what the trial chamber had done was make the excusal the rule. Instead of what is the exception, exactly.
I know the judges, they are strictly sticking to the code. Because the code, in a criminal trial, the code insists that the accused person be present permanently. That's what they did. They just interpreted the code. But I think his argument is that it needs to be taken in the context of the changed circumstances of the president and his deputy. Because when they were accused, they were not in office. Now that they're in office, he's calling for flexibility, and I agree completely. What I would like to take issue with, though, is all the people telling the president to skip or to confront. And I think that will not be wise for us, for this country, because let's face it, this is a very vulnerable country. In my opinion, it's extremely vulnerable. It's vulnerable because the government has demonstrated incapacity to deal with the violence meted on innocent Kenyans. It demonstrated that in 92, demonstrated that in 97, and I believe we escaped violence in 2002 because the merchants, those people who maintained this violence, felt that the government is coming back. And then the government came back. Then it did nothing on the Kiliku report. It did nothing on the Kilano Akivimo's report of 97. And the result was the explosion of 207. Now, if the president takes the route which he is being advised to take and confront the ICC and the warrants are issued, that will create anxiety towards 2017. Where I see the problem is in 2017, because 2017 then will be do or die for the president and his deputy. Now what that means, the other fellows will be trying to get power. That could create a problem. So it is in the interest of this country, this matter is sorted now. I don't support the deferral because I know the president said he's innocent during the campaigns. We believed him. That's why we elected him. And the only place to demonstrate that innocence is that court. And so far, given the route of trial, it doesn't really look ICC is having a case, in my opinion. I don't see that case from the witnesses so far. So these people, they should just go there and finish this thing so it doesn't hang on their neck. Because in deferral...
But I guess, Professor, and the arguments that we've seen even being fronted by the Cabinet Secretary of Foreign Affairs is it's easier said in terms of, yeah, let him go and, you know, stand trial. It's easier said, but when you look at it from the context of this is a head of state, you know, not everybody elected him, but he's the head of state, Kenyan head of state. And to have him seated undergoing trial, yes, this can be sorted out, but does he, the biggest question has been sit in that courtroom? Because that speaks of the country. At the end of the day, he's the president.
It is very humiliating for our president to sit in any courtroom. This is why our constitution doesn't allow it here, because it distracts him from concentrating on matters of state. And even now you can see that it's really distracting him. You can see this thing is not good for us at all. Now, if we can agree with these people, I mean with the court, because the court is thinking about both the accused and is thinking about the victims. So for us, we would rather not have this thing at all. Now it is there. That is a fact. We need to find the most sober way to deal with it, because I agree with the Cabinet Secretary. It's very humiliating for us. He's our president, and you know the international press will have a field day
with that. Let me bring in Wambogo and on the question of the meeting tomorrow by CORD members, and there's been all this talk. We need to find a bipartisan approach, but of course we're also hearing some of the members saying at the end of the day we must keep victims in this conversation, and also the question of pulling out of the ICC is out of the question. Like, we're not going to discuss that. Do you see that bearing any fruit in terms of seeing these two come together, Jubilee and CORD?
I think first and foremost, especially having been a CORD person and being involved in that campaign, I don't think it's ever been a CORD position that these cases should be at ICC. Remember from the very beginning, when Raila was Prime Minister, he'd been very strongly of the opinion that we needed to do a local tribunal.
Right.
That position never really changed. The one thing I do know for a fact that I personally don't agree with, and I know even CORD people will not agree with, is the whole idea of pulling Kenya out of the ICC. That one, it just doesn't sell. Now, as to whether it is possible to form a bipartisan approach to how to deal with ICC is something that's going to be interesting to watch. I know we've had situations where Senator Mudhama has said that people should carry their cross, while Nkaisari has insisted that Uhuru should not go.
Yeah.
Both of them being in CORD, one in ODM, one in Wiper.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an interesting conversation to watch tomorrow when CORD sits down, because also I think it's political suicide for any politician to stand up and say that somebody in their country should be tried in another country.
Yeah.
It's a kind of thing that will always come back to haunt you in future. And I think, and I say that because the reason you keep hearing about people who said let's don't be vague,
go to the Hague,
that thing keeps haunting them.
Yeah. Even
today.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very unwise politician who will not learn from the past and realize that you cannot pull that stunt today. But then also this whole conversation about the complication of having a president and what you were discussing with the professor just now, in my opinion, the challenge, I think the president in his individual capacity would want to sort this thing out as quickly as possible.
Yes.
I think that, and I keep making fun and saying, when he said it's a personal problem during the debate, he meant it. Yeah. And he actually believed, when I go into that, even if you guys elect me, I will sort it out. Now, what becomes a complication is that you then become president.
And you're not your own guy.
And then all of a sudden you're not your own person, number one. Number two, the court looks like it is thinking of everything possible to make your life complicated. So every time you have tried to look for an accommodation, look, I'm willing to come, but can you allow me to come only for this and this and this? And they say no.
Link,
Can I do video link? They say no. And so you now start creating, it starts becoming now antagonistic, which should actually not be the situation between the president and the court. It's okay for him to be antagonistic between his defense and the office and the prosecution. But then now what we're actually seeing is a situation where it's now becoming antagonistic between him and the court
he
as
feels
an
like
institution.
they're making it unnecessarily difficult for him.
Why is it the kind of things you're setting on my path are not what you do with other presidents? Is it that you do not recognize the fact that I am a president? Is that and his argument is actually valid, because when you start arguing and asking, you recognize I'm a president, but then you tell my people not to file documents with my title. You say, as far as we're concerned, when you're here, you are Mr. Kenyatta.
Yeah, and prosecution has been very keen to say we are not a political, we don't consider political,
but then really,
but you cannot escape.
You can't escape from the fact that we have a case that began nearly looking like a political. I mean, you had 3 people from the 2 political dimensions. So you're left to wonder, how was the investigation so neat that it ended up with 3 people? And then it comes down to the point where one of the people becomes president, the other person becomes the deputy president. And then you say, no, we will not recognize, because when you are running, you knew you have a case. The issue is that, as even in Kenya, I keep making fun, even in Kenya, when a senior counsel goes into court, the court actually recognizes the fact that we have a senior counsel in court. And you make, and adjustments are made. I think I keep hearing that your cases are hard fast if you're a senior counsel, so that you can be released to go and do other things. If that can happen, the court recognizes title. So for ICC to say they do not recognize that Uhuru is president is what complicates this situation. I don't think the issue is about whether or not he should go for the cases.
And of course, it's a story, Professor, will continue to watch in coming days. Very interesting to wait to see if in fact the UNSC will favor the president and the deputy in whatever they do come up with. But I want us to now go to Mombasa, and our question of the day today regarding the guns. We heard Redeemed Church pastors in a burial of one of their own call to be allowed to carry arms for security for themselves. But several things have been going on there. Other than that, we saw the burning of the church, the rowdy youth the other day on Thursday. There was chaos when one of the sheikhs or cleric leaders there was arrested, and so they engaged, the youth engaged in the police in running battles. So while I remember having a conversation with a pastor and a sheikh, and the sheikh was saying, at the end of the day, the authorities have to help us, because we know these people who are radicalizing our youth, but there's not much we can do. But when we see the police come and arrest when they have allegations or suspecting this particular individual because he's been accused of, inciting people, then we have youth, fighting the police from doing that. So how can a common ground in this battle be won? Because if it's left as is, analysts have said this is simmering. It could explode to be something very nasty.
Yeah, I think there is no middle ground here. The police need to get very tough on criminals.
Yeah.
And the police need not to give any excuse on criminals. Because when you arrest somebody on suspicion of a crime and some other people go on a rampage, that is undermining the authority of the state.
Right.
When the state arrests somebody, then you leave it to the courts to determine it, because the state will tender its evidence, and then the court will determine where it is. You defer to the law. These people are not differing to the law, and what it calls for then is for the state to act very tough and without any excuses. That way they are going to realize that there is a state, there is a neutral player, because if there is a conflict between the 2 people, the state steps in to sort out that conflict. Now, about the priests carrying the guns, I think the priests need to believe that Jesus is protecting them. They need to get the protection of the police, but not to physically carry weapons. Because
Pastor is preaching and there's a AK-47.
Because even if a preacher now sees somebody and they have to shoot, how will he make the determination if that fellow is a terrorist? But the police are trained to recognize a bad person. So they should ask for the protection of the police, but not for them to be armed. It will go contradiction to the Bible philosophy.
Yeah, it's a discussion, Wambogo, because last week there was also a poll conducted by Synovate, and very interesting findings that for the people at the coast, those who are polled, they said they have more confidence in the Mombasa Republican Council, MRC, in terms of their protection and fighting for their rights against the police. That even when some were asked, do we have a police station, would you feel safer if there was a police station near where you live, they said, no, we don't want a police station. So that kind of dynamic that we're seeing playing out in terms of where, more confidence lies is scary.
Yes. Personally, first, the whole idea of guns is untenable in my opinion, because at what point do you stop?
Yeah.
If you arm the clergy with firearms, you'll be arming them against who?
Yeah.
Who? The devil.
Who are you arming them against? Because you see, the people who you're arming them against are already in a fight with policemen.
Yeah.
So you're assuming the criminals are already in a fight with policemen who have guns. So when you arm the clergy, you're adding guns to which side and against who?
Yeah.
And at what point then some other people will come up and say, we are scared of the clergy, we need our own firearms.
Yeah.
And
the Congress guns.
And
everybody will have a gun.
So for countries, even those places where countries have had guns, you watch America and
always having that conversation.
This conversation doesn't end. The minute you begin it, it will not end. But then also this whole idea about what is starting to creep up as religious violence or religious-based violence, which I think can be stopped now, as of where we are right now. And I'm thinking about this Nyumba Kumi ideology that has been introduced by government. I think what the government actually needs to do with Nyumba Kumi is start from church and mosques. Kenya is a kind of country where you find a church or a mosque in nearly every village.
Every village now there is.
And the way I understand church, nearly every church has a network of how it conducts, how it connects itself to its membership. And I'm assuming this is the same thing that happens with mosques. I think what the Nyumba Kumi initiative needs to do is actually ride on those networks, starting from the coast. Because if we have Muslim clerics who are saying that we have a problem with some of our colleagues who are radicalizing the youth, then what we actually see is a problem between the connection between these clerics and government. And is it a situation where they're not sure they can trust government to do the right thing or what? So this conversation about Nyumba Kumi, and I had it being explained, it's not actually literally 10 houses. Okay. It is a small, it's a manageable size of households or connections. I assume in Nairobi, for example, nearly every major church either has a cell group or a home-based network.
Bible study,
home-based Bible study or something. Now, I'm assuming that's most probably the same thing at the coast. So, if we're going to deal with this whole idea of violence and insecurity that seems to be hiding, because it's actually hiding in religion, the place to begin would be to actually have religious leaders, both the Muslim and the Christian, at the coast, becoming the core around which you build this Nyumba Kumi ideology. Then you have a daily or bi-weekly conversation going on, and that way, as you interact, as a government security agencies interact with the religious leaders, you start having conversations. You don't wait for them to come only when they have a radical person to comment about. They will say, by the way, we have a visiting clergy, or so and so disappeared and he came back and he's become radicalized. Or then you start being able to nip a lot of these issues.
Okay, very quickly, Professor. Comment on that, the MRC, there being more confidence in the MRC in this particular scenario that's playing out at the coast, because at the end of the day, we're seeing that the youth, some of them have already been radicalized to the extent that now the police are the enemy, instead of the protector. So that in itself is very worrying signs. But when you have more confidence in a group that, I don't know, that it was outlawed at some point, that is not a good sign.
Yeah, that is, it is not good at all. And to me, a society will lose confidence with the police if crime are committed and the police is unable to act on the criminals. And then the illegal group is able to act. There is a movie on Gondi Father where one person there, one of those people there, the daughter gets abused, and then you go to the police, the abuser is arrested, then released. Then you go to the Gondi Father. And the godfather says, why didn't you come to me first? Now you go to the godfather, because godfather is not going to follow any law, any rule of evidence. Now, if it reaches that level there, the cause, then we're in trouble. Because the idea is that the police, we have faith in the police to the extent that when I'm hurt as a civilian, I will go to the police and the police will guarantee justice for me. Now, if that is the perception, then the country has a lot of work to do. Because the criminals cannot guarantee any justice. Because they are already outlaws in the first place. They are criminals. So these people need to be brought in. They need to trust the state. And the state will not be trusted by the way it impartially enforces its laws and the regulations.
But as Wambugo said, I think it's very important that that conversation happens between the sheikhs and the pastors in terms of just government, those leaders at the grassroots level, at the coast. That must happen.
Because also, Sophia, the MRC, for MRC to have stepped into the point where a poll can actually capture that the public seems to trust them more than government, it means there's actually a gap that the government has left.
A disconnect.
Because what tends to happen is power, they keep saying there's the issue of vacuums in power. You don't have a vacuum. You can't have a vacuum in power. So if you have a problem and the state doesn't help you, you'll get that help from somebody else. And by default, if that becomes a consistent source of help, that becomes your state. And you start owning that as your state. You start paying taxes to it, and that's how you start having illegal collections and extortion. And by default, so if that is happening, if MRC is doing that, then there's a vacuum in the state. And I think this is a challenge to the government, national government, and also to the county government. At what point do we have a situation where non-recognized entities are providing security, providing retribution, providing justice?
What the government should be doing.
What's the government doing?
Okay, let's move to the judiciary. Great discussion on that one, and it's a discussion we'll be pushing forward tomorrow as well on the show. We had Dr. Mutunga coming now to defend the Judicial Service Commission, and he said that they will not be cowed into hiding their problems in the interest of building fake public confidence, because everyone wants to say, oh yeah, everything is super, everything is great, but he's saying they want to show that yes, indeed they have problems. Another discussion is back on the JSC. 3 of the members will be leaving the commission. Abdullah is seeking re-election from the Law Society of Kenya as well. But in terms of the changes that are coming, and of course there's going to be a new registrar, chief registrar. Right now Kissinger is filling in acting capacity. Will this restore that confidence? Will this change things at the judiciary? The fact that we're likely to see new people coming in, because the way in which the JSC was structured in terms of the terms of the commissioners is that they don't all leave at once. There's some form of continuity and institutional memory that's carried on throughout. Will this work in terms of what has the tainted JSC with this particular drama that's been going on?
I actually don't subscribe to the idea that the judiciary is tainted right now, because I know how it was. It was very bad. It was the last place anyone wanted to go. And if you can remember, before this judiciary reform, there used to be a lot of unexplained matters in this country, because people didn't bother to go to the judiciary. They just go and look for hitmen. Mutunga has done a fantastic job. Now, it was naive for him or for any Kenyan not to expect the corruption to fight him back. There are people who are nostalgic about the past. They want to go back to the old system where there was no accountability, where the state simply was not there. Now, those people are going to do everything possible to undermine the judiciary, because judiciary is a key pillar of the state. Without an uncorrupt judiciary, you don't have a state. These people will fight back, and we have to keep on pushing. We have to support the judiciary and the reform they are undertaking. What I'm seeing there, reading through what went on, that was expected, because those people need to play the game the way they are used to playing the game, the corrupting game. And also, what is unfortunate is really, it's not judiciary, corruption is our national religion. We just have to accept that. And that means that this war on corruption will be a very long, drawn-out war. It's not going to be an easy one. I've seen it. So, Mutunga is doing the right thing, and they should continue doing this.
Wambogo?
I think the challenge that the judiciary is facing right now is to determine who are actually the corrupt people. You see, what we have been encountering, or what we have been watching over the last month, or is it 2 months, has been what seems to have been a fight between personalities in the judiciary.
Yeah.
And last week we had Gladys Sholei fired. So the assumption would be that if it had been it was her fault, we'll see a certain, because it was actually it became created to be a fight between one side and another side, and the representations of each side were Ahmed Nasir on one side and Gladys Sholei on the other side. Now we have a situation when one has left.
And now there's mud coming for Ahmed Nasir.
Yes, and now we see now we have mud being thrown at somebody else.
Yeah.
And you can't, there's a part of me that starts to imagine that there seems to be people seated outside the judiciary who are interested in bringing the judiciary down to its knees.
Definitely.
Or take it back to where it was, because you'd assume this fight will get finished at some point, but it doesn't look like it's getting finished. I mean, immediately one person is out, it's like the guns get zeroed in on somebody else, and you wonder where it will stop, because we have people who are retiring. It would be interesting to watch how they will be replaced, the process of replacing them, and then the people who are being left are still being fought. So it's like the judiciary is being kept busy, and you're left to wonder, they're being kept busy while what is happening. You get, so we have this conversation where the Chief Justice is being forced to actually come out to the public and explain, I am fighting corruption. That statement where he picked up what Margaret Thatcher said, I am not for turning. By the time he has to make that statement, it tells you there's a lot of pressure for him to turn.
There's a lot of pressure.
So he's saying, I'm not turning. Where is that pressure coming from? Because was it coming from Gladys Sholei? If it was, are we assuming it's finished? If it wasn't, and I think if he's going to say, then he better say everything. Or we agree, there's a statement said about Serikali. Serikali ni Serikali. Some things, the minute, some secrets, sometimes, and I know Prof might not agree with me here, but there's some things government does that happen within government that needs to be managed within a certain system. If they come out, then they better come out everything. Because if they come out in bits and pieces, then you end up looking bad. Really bad.
Gentlemen, as our time is running out, I want us to talk a bit about what's happening in immigration. I mean, we came from a very tragic attack at Westgate, and a lot of that has been blamed on just some laxity that perhaps has been there in the immigration department. And we saw 15 officers were fired. The biggest question is that enough? And what can be done to, because people will question, is that just a knee-jerk reaction? Okay, we've fired these people, we are now, upping the war against terror. I mean, they offer the issuance of very important identification documents. We saw even in a story that was aired on KTN last week. It's very easy, about 10,000, 15,000, a few thousands. You will get all these documents and they will be real. It was so funny that one of them was Samantha late with Mora. And you're like, even for the person issuing this, I mean, really. So it's a department that needs to seriously have some work done in terms of just regaining that confidence that everybody who's going to hold this document is, not an immigrant, an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, I think the corruption in that department has been there for very long. And this is our greatest weakness. In fact, the president should declare this as threat number one to national security. Because all these people who have been coming in here and buying, there's been these stories all over that is a big business. The minister, when he was there, Otieno Gayong, people saying that he simply set shop. Of course, these are stories. Nobody really knows. There's been no inquiry. But 15 is not enough because that system is rotten. When somebody is deported from Kenya, and then somebody sneaks back in the country, and his passport is not even stamped, then something is wrong with our system. And that means we can't really protect ourselves. What I think is there's not enough to fire those people. Also, the government need to mop up our cities. Mop up all the illegal immigrants in the city, and not necessarily Somalis, because there are others. There's Ethiopians, there's other people, not just Somalis. And to me also, I could advise this state to use a very unorthodox method in identifying people who are not Kenyans, whether they have a passport or not, whether they have an ID or not. There is one truth about our neighbors. most of them have not gone through the job for TB, the one in the hand here.
Okay.
If you meet these people in the streets and they check the job and they don't, you can assume these people are born here. You can know they were not born here,
okay.
And therefore they have bought whatever ID they may be carrying. It is a very easy thing. But in a serious note, the cities need to be cleaned of illegal immigrants, because people have to be hindered by somebody in order for them to accumulate time and intelligence enough to be able to attack a building.
Okay. Very quickly.
I think first and foremost, in my opinion, the 15 people was a knee-jerk reaction. And when I heard about it, my first question was, how did you get them?
Yeah.
How are they connected to Westgate?
Yes.
Because you see, we have been told this is connected to Westgate.
True.
How is it connected to Westgate? Are we saying these are the 15 people who gave the 4 or 5 or 10 or 16 people? We know we've not really given entrance. I mean, are they the ones who give them the documents? How is this connected to that, or is this something else that is now being showcased to look like it is a part of the Westgate investigation?
Right.
But then I think my problem is even a lot more fundamental than that. It is clear Kenya doesn't have a centralized security management system, because that's what we need. We need a system that has a common message or a common conversation that starts from the police, goes to immigration, goes to borders. You know, how are we having a problem with terrorists in one capacity, and immigration is selling documents? You can tell there's a complete disconnection. So we need to have a centralized security management process, somewhere where it's a National Security Advisory Committee that sits every week or every day and looks and has representation from all arms of government that have some way or other deal with processes that hinder or advance insecurity. Then we have immigration people being told, look, you must be very, very careful on the following. We have the people taking care of the borders being told, you must be careful on the following. You have the people at the dock, at the ports, being told, you must be careful on the following. But this comes from a common takeoff point. There must be a common takeoff point of how we're managing our security. But we can't give immigration a responsibility of ensuring they don't give documents without telling them how documents connect to terrorists who come and bomb you. And for all you know, an immigration person is at Westgate. And nobody's telling you that, that passport you sold for 20,000 shillings,
that's the reason
that's the guy who came and bombed Westgate.
Wow. All right.
That connection is what we need.
We're lacking that. Gentlemen, I'll give you each 1 minute, because I want you to comment very quickly on Kiambu County's taxable death. The dead, that was a story that elicited quite mixed reactions last week. So their proposed burial fees, a quick mention. So to conduct a burial, a family, the bereaved will fork out 4,500 if the dead is an adult, 3,000 for a child, 2,500 for an infant. And then families whose relatives die and are buried in cemeteries within the county will pay 8,000 and 10,000 if while those who loved ones die in the other counties but are buried in Kiambu County. And also non-residents 25,000. So this, they say, is in an effort to raise money for their 12-point-something billion shillings. What do you have to say about that? It's an interesting one.
I think we need to figure out better methods of raising money. In death situations, for us here is a very sad situation, is where the family has lost somebody. What the family requires from the government is consideration for that loss. They don't require additional taxes on that one. So I think the Kiambu people or the government generally, they need to figure out better methods, not more oppressive, because that is an oppressive method. But it's a testament to our lack of morality in this country. Morality in the sense that we don't feel pain of other people. As a country, we don't feel. That's why corruption is so much. Because if we felt the pain of that child who is dying because the medicine is expired, but it corruptly came in, if you feel pain of that person who is killing 40 people because he bought the license, then it means, if we feel their pain, it means that we can correct this. This is an indication that we don't feel the pain of others, that legislation. because the proposing that kind of a legislation is also a total disconnect between the government and its citizens. These people feel empathy. They need empathy. The people have lost a relative. They need the government to feel their pain. We need to work on our morality. We need to work on feeling pain of other people.
Finally, Wambugo, as you close.
I think what we are seeing from Kiambu is a sign of the problems that we're going to encounter with a lot of other county governments. It's a disconnection between what, you see, they're looking for money, but then I think the county governments was established to develop their counties. And what they're actually supposed to be thinking about is how do you develop the county so that you can actually generate more income. But when you start looking at things that happen, people will die. People will eat. There was even the issue of eating, if you're eating a chicken or goat. If you can't start taxing processes that exist. The reason we devolved government was to actually develop, to increase our development, and by increasing our development, increase the revenues. So ideally what we should actually be hearing coming from Kiambu County or any other county is what are the ideas of increasing revenue. Well,
that is the idea.
But you see, that's, you don't increase revenue by going, you should be talking about, we are I mean, part of what we hear from Machakos, whether it's going to work or not, where you're saying we're willing to give land to investors. We're willing to, so that when that investor comes, you generate your licensing businesses. So you're actually looking for money from people who are making money. All right. Not from people who have lost.
Because people will die. I mean, it's part of life. So, gentlemen, thank you both. Our time is up. We appreciate you making time for us this morning, discussing some of these stories that we've seen play out and make headlines in the country. Professor Naituli, Wambogo, Ngunjiri. It happens. Thank you both. Have a great day.